Right. Okay. Let's kick off then, because we do have quite a lot to get through. I'm joined today by Amit from AWS. He's got some stuff to do later on, but I'll kick us off. It may not have escaped your attention that everyone's kind of losing their minds about AI at the moment. The text on your screen now. This is genuine pieces of text that I found on websites, on news headings in the last year or two, and there's a lot of very kind of bold claims in here. And I want to believe. I am a nerd by history and by trade, and I would love for all this stuff to be true. But I think it would be probably remiss of us not to consider that we're probably at the top of the peak of inflated expectations here in the hype cycle, and that's fine. All new technology sort of goes through this process, but what it means is that there are things that we need to be thinking about that in all of the hype we may not yet have considered, and so we're going to be talking about those today. My name's John Topper. I'm founder of the Scale Factory. In November, we were acquired by a business called 1010, which is why I've got both logos on my t-shirt, and why there is another person connected on this webinar pressing the buttons, which is something that I would have had to do in the past. So thanks, Danielle. Good to be working with you on this stuff. My background is systems administration, DevOps, that sort of thing. And I've seen a lot of hype cycles. It was crypto, we had Kubernetes, we've had an awful lot of those sorts of things to consider. And I think what I've learned over the years is that hype is a signal to us. Those of us in sort of strategic roles, CTOs, VP engineering, architects, technical decision makers, the hype cycle tells us that we should be thinking, will this new technology have some kind of impact on us and our business? Should we be adopting it? And how do we do that safely if we do that? And I hope you've joined today because you are asking yourself these questions about your own use of AI. So when we talk about AI, what do we actually mean? It's a term that was coined many, many years ago and has been used for an awful lot of things. But let's sort of scope AI today for the purposes of this webinar. I'm not talking about this sort of traditional machine learning, like facial analysis, those sorts of things. This is AI, but it's not the type of AI that we're talking about today. I'm also not talking about things like recommendation engines. That Amazon have a service that will recommend you buy a big expensive television if you recently bought a big expensive television, and that those sort of systems are ML and AI ultimately, but that's again not the sort of thing that we're talking about today. I am, of course, talking about large language models. These are the things that we've all been collectively losing our minds over the last, I guess, 2 or 3 years now. And what I'm talking about today is in the context of large language models as they are used to drive the features of the product you're building. So we're not talking about code generation tools you might be using to build the product. What I'm talking about is large language models as deployed as part of your infrastructure, offering outcomes to your users, essentially. We're just going to start off with a poll. I'm sorry, this webinar is interactive. If you join thinking you could just sort of sit back and relax, you cannot. We're going to ask Danielle to release the first poll. There it goes. Just kind of interested to learn whether you are today using LLMs as part of your product. If you're using them in production already, if you're still experimenting with them, if you have experimented but decided against going that way, or if that's not something you considered at all, just to get a read on the room, I guess, and see where everyone is relative to this stuff. So I'm going to give it another sort of 20 seconds for you all to put your vote in. If you can't see the poll, sometimes on operating systems it pops up behind other windows. That's particularly true on Linux. Linux users always having the worst time with desktop applications. Sorry that there's no command line version of Zoom, otherwise maybe I'd be using that as well. Okay, let's close that poll, Danielle, and maybe share the results if we can. All right, so 46% of folks not not using LLMs as part of the product today. 38% of people still experimenting. Good. I hope this webinar is useful to you. You're sort of the target audience for some of this. And 15% of folk already using LLMs in production today. Well done, brave early adopters. Thanks for that. I think we can close that poll results now as well. So today we're going to be looking at three areas of consideration when we're looking at these LLMs. We're looking at models, security, and regulation, because everyone loves a bit of EU directive on a Wednesday afternoon. We'll be covering that in some degree of detail. So starting today, keeping up with model development. If you're using AI tools or LLMs inside your SaaS product, if you're building SaaS products, it's likely that you're using them for something like this. This is customized content generation, content summarization and scoring. I know, people who are doing customer voice type applications. I know Intercom, for example, or Internet.io, that they are using LLMs to summarize content to report back to internal users or to generate reports. Conversational interfaces, those are the chat bots that all the people that you want to talk to are using instead of hiring real humans. And they're getting better, arguably, over time. It's kind of frustrating to use in places. I hope some of you dialed into this are fixing that for the industry somewhere, because I'd like to see better chatbot interfaces for sure. Natural language querying. So we've seen, particularly in tools like Amazon's own QuickSight tooling, in Honeycomb, using LLMs to take English language and turn that into some kind of bespoke query language to query a backend and generate data reports to make it easier for people to adopt new tools for that sort of thing. And autonomous AI agents, we're seeing a lot more of these, particularly in the software generation space. Amazon released a product called Kiro this week into preview, which is an agentic system for writing code. So you're probably thinking about LLMs in this sort of way if you are building them into your SaaS. If I've missed some, do drop them in the chat. I'd love to update this slide with some more use cases. These are the ones that came to mind for me. And typically, what this will look like in your world is you've got your SaaS application. You are putting a prompt of some kind into that application, which is making a request of some kind of large language model over an API, typically. And your application might be integrated with a database, or probably will be integrated with a database, as most applications are. You might also be making the data that's in your SaaS application for your customers available to the model in order to flesh out the queries and make the large language model more useful to your users. And you might be doing that either by fine-tuning the model, which is, I guess, probably not the recommended approach for the most part, or embedded in the prompt as part of retrieval augmented generation lookup. So you're collecting data from a vector store and putting it into the prompt based on the context of that user. New release from Amazon this week, S3 vector tables, allows you to do this without using a standard vector database, but in S3 natively. If you're interested in that, drop me a line later, we can talk about that. And if you're doing something agentic, you might have lots of these things going on. And some of these systems might also be capable of making external API calls. It might be able to send email, look at documents that you've made available to it through your Google Drive or whatever. So there's a lot of stuff going on there. And in this world, standard operational concerns apply. I think over the last sort of 10 years, we've all got a bit better about operational thinking of the systems that we build. And so when you're building these sorts of things, you're going to be thinking about authentication and security. You're going to be thinking about tenancy. If you're building a SaaS world, you're thinking about scalability, rate limits, and so forth, health checking, making sure that the service is resilient, retrying requests that fail. You'll be looking at service level agreements, the agreements that you're making with your customers. You're going to be thinking about monitoring and observability and logging, budgets and cost management. And you might be thinking about functional testing. And all of these considerations apply to the AI world or the LLM world, just as they would with any other API service that you were using. And I'm sure you're all across this in everything that you're doing, right? Operational considerations are important. But things do get kind of weird when you look at functional testing in the context of the LLM world. And that's kind of because in a traditional world, testing whether the code is working or te testing whether your system is behaving the way you expect is a very easy is 2 plus 2 equals 4 kind of consideration. Um, when you're looking at what's going on in your AI models, that's going to be less true. For example, if I were to use two different models to summarize the same text, so I took the Wikipedia page describing a Apple TV show called Severance, which you should all be watching if you haven't already. And it spits out two completely different results when I ask those two different models to summarize those websites. And looking at this summary, it's both reasonable. Like there's nothing wrong with either of these summaries, but one might be more correct than the other based on the type of thing that you're doing. And so my kind of position on LLMs as they pertain to components of your software is that you should be thinking about making it easy to swap models out because models change over time and different versions of models within one family add new features. You might decide that you want to choose a different model for performance reasons or for cost reasons. And when you do that, you need to be able to figure out whether the new model is behaving as well as the one that you've just swapped it out for. And there are a handful of ways of thinking about this. Um, Creating some kind of quantitative quality score for comparison is probably what you want to be doing. There are various ways of doing this. There are open source benchmarks you can use for testing particular types of textual operation. You might invoke the services of another large language model to act as a judge and prompt it to score whether or not the text that you've got out of your model is the thing that you want to see. Or you might use humans to annotate the results of these things. Amazon Bedrock, which we're going to talk about in a bit, provides a mechanism by which you can engage the services of humans for doing model comparison. 1010, who acquired us this year, they have a team of testers, some of whom can do this sort of work. So comparing the output of your text models is probably a thing you want to be doing. And the reason for that is that there's just a huge amount of new model stuff going on all the time. This is a very quick moving area. And you might be forgiven for assuming that all of large language models is ChatGPT because they got there first. And there was a lot of hype around it, and the word ChatGPT has kind of become synonymous with these things. But actually, there are loads more models available out there, and you should be trying them. As and when new models become available, you should evaluate them in your use case and see whether or not they do better. Maybe from a quality perspective, or whether they do more or less the same, but for less time, less money, etc. If you look at the benchmark provided by this business or organization, artificialanalysis.ai, they run benchmarks comparing new models as they come out. These are benchmarks on intelligence that I took recently, and they're comparing the models that are available through Amazon Bedrock, which is why there's no ChatGPT here, for intelligent performance. Essentially, they've constructed a bunch of prompts that they can use to benchmark the performance of these models in certain circumstances. And you can see that on the top end there, because the higher numbers are better in this case. Claude 4 Opus Thinking is outperforming everything else. Down at the bottom end is an Amazon model called Nova Micro, which is less intelligent as far as the benchmark is concerned. However, when you look at this in the context of price, the lower numbers are better in this case because that is cost per million tokens. The Nova Micro there on the left now is much better from a cost perspective because it is dirt cheap compared to Claude Opus, which is $30 per 1 million tokens. So there are trade-offs to be made, and every model that is released will have unique characteristics that may make it suitable for the platform that you're building. And so you should be thinking about, how do I try these models and make sure that they're doing the right things? I mentioned Amazon Bedrock. Amit's from Amazon. He's going to talk a bit about Bedrock and some of the features that Bedrock has in a second. When I get to you, Amit, we'll nearly there. Bedrock is a managed service from Amazon, part of the AWS cloud, which provides access to and features around a large number of LLMs. LLMs from the likes of AI 21, Meta, AWS's own models are on there. There's Mistral coming up soon. There'll be models from Writer. There's Cohere, Anthropic, Poolside, Stability, DeepSeek, Luma, and 12 Labs. Like this, it's a huge footprint of available models that you can just use if you are using the AWS service to get at your LLMs. So another quick poll. Next one, Danielle, if you will. This should be a question about who your main cloud vendor is and what models you are making use of right now. There we go. Perfect. We'll give you a couple more minutes to respond to these. So we're sort of interested in learning. Are you an AWS user today? Hopefully so. We're an AWS practice. Amit's here from AWS. We do like Azure and GCP users, just not as much. We tend to find you're not as handsome. That's generally true. We're also asking if you are using LLMs in your product today, what you're using for that, just to sort of see what you're currently trying out. And we're asking which models you're currently using in your product, just to get a sort of view on whether everyone's on one set of models or whether there's a bit more kind of general use as well. So I'm gonna give that another, let's say 20 seconds. Uh, Gemini would be under the other link, Rob. No, I didn't put Gemini in there. I think that's probably less common. We'll see. If everyone's got a tick in other rather than the other things, then I'll have to rethink this poll. But you can only put a certain number of entries in a Zoom poll, so I wanted to make sure I captured the bigger ones. All right, Daniel, let's close that poll and share the results. Thank you very much. So 100% of respondents, of which there were 12, AWS. Amit's happy. That's his salary paid for this month. We've got some Bedrock users already, good 25% of folk on Bedrock. Some of the folk on OpenAI API platform. 1 of 12 on other, and that might be Gemini, I guess. And 50% of people attending today not running LLMs. And models you're using the product. 67% OpenAI and 50% other. All right. Those of you who did vote other, if you'd like to pop in the chat what it is that you're using, that'd be interesting. Get a view on whether those are models provided by Bedrock or something else. Good. I think we can close that now, Danielle. Thank you very much. So I think my steer to you, if you're building LLMs or building products that make use of LLMs, you should be investing in building tooling for evaluating prompts and models, because that landscape is changing all the time. You don't want to be stuck on just what's there in your product today. You will want to be able to adopt other models in future, and so building the tools to evaluate those things, and also building software in such a way it's abstracted enough to be able to do that is my recommendation to you. You should be continuously evaluating. I think as new models become available, you should be sort of setting some time aside in your sprints to just throw that through your tests to see how performance is. Optimize for change, because I think this landscape is not staying still ultimately, and you will want to be able to move quickly along with it. Next topic, security. Often the last thing to be thought about in the middle of a hype cycle. We certainly saw that with Kubernetes. We spent a huge amount of time in that hype cycle mopping up after terribly secured Kubernetes deployments. What happens when you get new technology? Well, you get new threats. And in the case of the LLM world, these new threats look like prompt attacks, such as jailbreaks or prompt injections, data privacy vulnerabilities, where your use of those LLMs could be coerced into leaking data that your customers have provided or that your models are trained on, and agents that go rogue, where they maybe have too much capability for what they're doing, and can both get at your data and also send emails. That sort of thing is probably a dangerous place to be. My view really is that prompt security is undifferentiated, right? The way that you want to secure how you're interacting with a large language model is something that doesn't change between models. And in my world, from an architectural perspective, when something is undifferentiated, that means buy a product and give that problem to someone else. Don't be building those solutions yourself. So I'm going to introduce now Amit from AWS, part of the team helping to sell generative AI solutions. Amit is going to walk us through the things that go on in Amazon Bedrock as they pertain to security. Over to you, Amit.
Thanks, Sean, for such an engaging session. I'm going to share my screen and we'll talk about Bedrock and all the interesting features which are on Bedrock. Um, John, please give me a thumbs up if you can see my slides.
Yep, good.
Hey. Good afternoon, everyone. As I mentioned, I'm Ahmed and I manage AML business in the UK, specifically for the ISV and the startups. So happy to kind of meet you all. The primary thing that I will be kind of covering in this session is what is Amazon Bedrock. If you have been using it, great. Else I'll kind of give you a quick preview of that and then talk about the data privacy and protection, something which is top of mind for everyone while you're building any of your GenAI solutions. Talk about why Bedrock is secure, why you can trust it, and I'll quickly talk about show you a very initial high level architecture diagram how it is technically secure to begin with, and we'll talk about some certain features which are called guardrails on Bedrock, which allows you to secure your workload and make sure you're not leaking your data, you're giving the right output to your users. So as I mentioned, there are quite a few features on Bedrock, but we'll be concentrating more on guardrails. Moving on, what is Amazon Bedrock? Amazon Bedrock is the platform, AWS service, which allows you to build generative AI applications. There are a lot of things which are needed to build those applications, starting from LLM itself, but there is more, such as you might want to, in future, customize your model. You might want to add a RAG database, which is essentially your business data, which you want to augment to the LLM to decide what is the right answer or right next best action. Also, you will definitely want to add guardrails to the solution so that any data is not leaked. Any data which you send to LLM is kind of secured and not sent out to anywhere else. So security is of primary concern. So all those are taken care of in Bedrock, which I'll talk through in the next few slides. Again, a repetition of what John mentioned, but essentially there are many model providers which which have their models on Bedrock, starting from AI 21 to Amazon models and so on. Anthropic being a big partner of Amazon. We have the latest models, the Claude 4 models already on Bedrock, which are really being kind of used by several customers. Quickly talking about, yes, Bedrock allows you to fine tune the model if you really need to in the near future. That's a conversation definitely we want to have with you. We want to support you, ensure that you are kind of moving in the right direction. If you need to fine tune, agents is very kind of picking up in the whole industry. I was giving a session earlier this morning to a set of CTOs on agentic AI, how the industry is changing. So Bedrock allows you to build agents from just a click of a button. You can integrate your data using knowledge bases and guardrails, which I'll cover in more details. And very important, your data is secure. Let me talk about the security of data in a little bit more details. Specifically, any data that you send to any model on Bedrock that is never shared with any model provider, neither AWS has access to any of those data. So that data is your data and stays is used only to prompt the LLM, get the response back to you, and that data disappears. So unless you want to log that data in your account, that data will be logged, else we even do not retain any logs. All the data in transit and at rest is encrypted. No rocket science there. This technology has existed and that continues. And specifically, as I mentioned earlier, if you want to log that data, it is your responsibility to enable it because we will not save any data and not share any data with any LLM provider. So from security from by design, this is the whole Bedrock platform is secure, ensuring that it is ready to help you build production ready workloads. Talking about how the Bedrock is architected itself, which allows all that I described a couple of minutes back. So essentially, without going into much details of what this architecture diagram is, but essentially on the left is where customer accounts are, and on the right is an shared account where essentially LLM providers such as Anthropic, such as AI 21 host their models, and your data kind of comes and hits the LLM, gets the response, and it goes back. the LLM provider has no access to any data which is sitting within that account on the right hand side. Neither does AWS. And at the same time, as customers, you do not have access to the model itself in terms of you cannot copy that model. So that's a protection that we offer to the model provider as well. So there's a protection which is for model provider, for customer, and AWS is providing and running that whole infrastructure with all the security elements that you enjoy for all the other solutions. Moving on to talk about guardrails. Guardrails is a very, very critical topic. And when kind of Gartner did this survey asking customers on why they are why certain CTOs are feeling that their AI applications are not moving ahead into production, the primary reasons which came out is hallucination, where this is where the models can very confidently produce some data, produce some output which looks real, but it is actually not. And the second thing which came out is the people have been scared about how the data will be used. So these are the primary reasons why there are a lot of workloads which haven't gone into production. Maybe a good point to ask a question to run a poll, Danley. Like, do you see these concerns? Do you see different concerns when you are working on your use cases when you took your workload into production, or GenAI workload into production? If you could please answer this question, what challenges are you facing to take your GenAI production workload into production, or what have you faced in the past? I'll probably hold on for 10 more seconds.
I'd say yeah, it's a long form text box, so we probably want to give people a little longer to get their typing in there. I'm sure they're all good typists given their backgrounds.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Thanks, Stanley. Maybe we'll share a short summary of this towards end of the session. But thanks for that, Stanley. Thanks for doing that. Good. So with that, so yeah, knowing that there are concerns in taking those workloads into production, Bedrock has built guardrails within the platform itself. So when I say guardrails, essentially it can evaluate prompts, it can look at model responses, it can ensure that PI is redacted, it can ensure that certain kind of data which is being sent to model or output from the model is not essentially sent to the customer. So you are essentially going to have a gate to ensure any non-relevant data is not sent out. And let me talk a little bit more about it. But before I essentially, if you look at kind of guardrails, they can be guardrails which are deterministic controls, and these could be like you might have certain defined words which you do not want to be kind of talking to the customer, or they could be topics such as you do not want to talk about financial advice, or you do not want to talk about say traveling to a certain part of the world, or you do not want certain behaviors to be kind of taken into control if you're building certain kind of chatbots. At the same time, there are probabilistic controls which could be about, are the answers which are given by the model are relevant to the question which was asked? Are these really coming from my data source? These are where the probabilistic controls come in. Guardrails offer both these controls, both guardrails to cover both of these controls essentially, as we'll see through. The first guardrail which I would like to introduce is content filtering, where you can just by a click, just by scrolling the bar, you can kind of enable the kind of guardrails which would stop, say, for example, hate, insults, sexual violence, misconduct, or prompt attacks itself. So you can stop those going into the LLM, and in the second part of the screen, you can stop that coming out of the model as well. So these enable you to, just by click of scrolling a button, you will be able to get those set up for your use cases. Moving on, you can filter the content to say, okay, these are the kind of categories where I do not want any input or output to kind of come through. So you are able to scroll and enable those guardrails. At the same time, you can also enable prompt, ensure that your solution is secure from prompt attacks. Essentially, what it means is nobody is able to inject through a console or through a chatbot. They are not able to inject something in your prompt which exposes some certain kind of data. And there's a classical example from a couple of years back where Volkswagen essentially did not have a proper prompt attack strategy, and somebody could kind of reconfigure the prompt to say, okay, you are going to sell me a car at $1, and then kind of they went through the whole transaction and the car was sold in $1. It's a public case, you can kind of Google it and you will find it. But those are the kind of prompt attacks which you do not want to happen for your use cases. And just by kind of enabling this particular prompt attack guardrail, you will be able to secure your workload. Moving on, there are multi-model toxicity detectors. What it means is you might want to ensure that any images that are coming in or any image generation that is happening, that also doesn't have a toxicity. Apart from text, which is pretty straightforward, but also images. So all those are provided by default as part of the Bedrock platform. And also, if there is a guardrail which is enabled and it is activated, you might want to just detect it, or you might want to block that content. All that features are available on the platform. Here's a quick video of showcasing how content filtering is going to work. So as you can see, you can kind of scroll through, enable those controls, and then you can start testing it against a model. Here it is an Anthropic model. So we are going to upload an image here. And as you can see, there is a fight which is kind of being showcased as part of this. And let's see what the model kind of detects. Is it able to stop that going to the model or so here you go. So there was an intervention by a guardrail, and it in the logs you can see it was violence detected, and then you can kind of stop it or you can take appropriate action. So depending upon the use case that you're running, you might want to detect it or you might want to block it. So those are enabled on the platform. And moving on, yeah, there's another guardrail where you can define denied topics, and it could be as simple as do not talk about financial advice or do not talk about medical history. So those are things which can be in a free text. You can define those topics, and those will be enabled on like those content will be blocked to be kind of sent to the customer from the model. Now, coming to a very critical guardrail, which is PII reduction. Essentially, if you have any of your PII data being sent to the model, or there could be PII data which is coming out of the model, you want to identify that, which this particular guardrails allows, and then you might want to either block it or you might want to mask it. All those capabilities are a part of the platform. So you will be able to define the guardrails, and as you can see through in this, there are a lot of PII regex which is already defined as part of the platform as well. A quick video to demonstrate this particular guardrail. So you can add a PII, and you could say, okay, I'm going to mask it or block it, as I mentioned earlier, and we are going to mask it here. Name we are going to detect, but email we are going to mask. Yeah. So yeah, you could see the intervention there, and you could see that the email was masked as we wanted the model to do. So all those are built-in features within Bitrock. Moving to the next section, you might want to filter certain words, which might be business critical for you. All those capabilities are there. You can upload a local file or something from S3 up to 10,000 words per use case per guardrail. You can kind of upload those, and those will be detected and stopped by Bedrock. And coming to one of the most important guardrails, which is essentially checking whether the response which has come through, is it really grounded? What does that mean? Essentially is that using mathematical models, the Bedrock can identify whether the response is coming from the RAG database or is it coming from hallucinations which are being created by the model itself. So these checks can be enabled just by a click, and based upon your threshold, you can decide what is the threshold that which where you want the model to kind of be generative, but at the same time, you want to make sure that it is still relevant. And at the same time, there's another check which is called relevance, where there's again using mathematical models, we are able to identify the output from the model. Is it really answering the question which was asked at the first instance? Those checks ensure that yes, you are not going out of the context and just kind of outputting something, but that what is outputted is relevant to the question which was asked. Again, there's a threshold level which you can decide based upon your use case, and that will help you to stay relevant. Moving on to the so again a little bit more details on the grounding and relevance here. You'll get the slides and kind of you can look through. Coming to towards the end of the session, towards the end of my slides, all these guardrails which I talked about can be set up on the input to LLM. So if there is some PII data which you want to stop, or there is some kind of words or denied topics that you want to stop to be sent to LLM, even before those can be processed, you can enable the input guardrails. And at the same time, if there are things that you want to stop at the output before those are shown to the customer, you can set up guardrails even at the output. So I have customers who are using it both at input and output to ensure that their solution is secure and is working and is answering the right questions to the customers, instead of kind of creating some output. To conclude, essentially, all these features and guardrails which I talked about are available through API integration. You are able to set up the guardrails using APIs. So there's an ID for each guardrail which you can enable for workloads on Bedrock, even outside Bedrock. So if you have any workloads on our SageMaker platform or any third-party platform, you can still use the same guardrails which are set up on Bedrock to be secure. So yeah, looking at some stats, we have been able to help block up to 88% of harmful content, which could be from images, which could be from text over the last few years. We are able to help customers reduce hallucinations, which was a big challenge, which was called out even in the Gartner report. We have been able to help fine-tune models on Bedrock, and essentially help build the confidence which is necessary for you to take your workload into production using the right models, using the right tools. So with that, I'll pass it back to John. But essentially, Bedrock will allow you to build your GenAI solutions confidently, which is critical for this particular era. Thank you.
Great.
Back to you.
Thanks. Thank you, Amit. We have a question here from Marco, who's asking whether bedrock guardrails can be enforced at an organization or a organizational unit level. I think the context that Marco has in mind is the type of guardrails that you get in a control tower environment, for example, whether you can sort of force those guardrails down onto individual accounts as you set up new bedrock instances. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, so that is possible. Again, essentially, the idea is that you are setting up guardrails, and which can be available to any use case that is being set up. Yes, so you can kind of force those guardrails to be set up for any use case that kind of goes through Bedrock. Yes.
Yeah, gotcha. Good. Yeah, I think from an implementation perspective, Marco, my understanding is that a lot of these guardrails are that they are security settings on Bedrock rather than IAM or service control policy rules or those sorts of things, but that you would if you wanted to create a specific set of security guardrails in each account you create, you would probably orchestrate that from your control tower and then maybe use SCPs to lock out users from tinkering with those guardrails that you don't want them to be able to touch. That would be my assumption. Chris is asking, does Bedrock support automated testing? For example, testing 100 example RAG query questions.
Yes, so there's something called there's an option on Bedrock which allows you to test models and test RAG databases. So absolutely, the feature is there. Let me quickly pull out the right word, and I'll comment on the chat window.
Yeah, great stuff. Danielle, I think it may be that I and Amit can't comment to attendees in the webinar chat. I think that's a security setting in Zoom. You might want to see if we can tweak that so we can respond in there. Otherwise, maybe Chris, you could ask that question in the Q&A window, which I believe we can access. An anonymous attendee asks, "What is the pricing of guardrails?"
Interesting question. Yeah, I want to be paid my salary, absolutely. So I'll put a link to the guardrails pricing in the chat window, but essentially the guardrail pricing works per guardrail type and number of words which are kind of being filtered through, and I'll put in the details in the chat window for that.
Great. Good stuff. All right, I'm going to share my screen. We can take some more questions at the end if there are still burning questions that you have. So, as a sort of overall guidance around security or keeping up with security around this stuff, I think adopting third-party security solutions is the right answer. And my view is that if you're building LLM applications on AWS, you should be using Bedrock rather than calling out to third-party service. All of the security features that Amit's just covered there apply to every LLM that you use on Bedrock. And as new LLMs that appear there, the same guardrails will be available on those LLMs as well. And so there's not much you will need to do that. Further, these are changing all the time. There are new security guardrails being implemented, and you shouldn't have to think about all of that stuff too hard yourself if you adopt somebody else's approach to security, which I'm very very pro. Um, the Lost my train of thought. We'll move on to the next section here, which is talking about regulation, which is probably the driest part of the session today. I've been reading a lot of legislation about AI, so that you don't have to. In this current world, obviously GDPR is still a standard. If you're selling to people in Europe, or you are yourself based in Europe, GDPR is something that you need to be worried about. It applies whether you're doing AI things or not. You might, if you're building a SaaS solution in Europe, typically enterprise buyers are looking for ISO 27001. In the US, that might be SOC 2. There is an EU AI Act that we're going to get into in a bit of detail, but not in a huge amount of detail today. And we've got some UK legislation coming up that we should be thinking about as well. Um, if you've built an ISMS or information security management system for ISO 27001, you kind of know what that looks like. It's an assessment of the risks that might target your platform and the mitigations or treatments that you've applied to those risks. And it's a sort of continuous process for demonstrating that you are thinking about information security well as an organization. You get an audit every year or every couple of years to make sure that is the case. I think if you're building LLM-based software, then there are some new risks that you need to be thinking about, and those risks are intellectual property violations. So I don't think it's at all controversial to say that a lot of these LLMs are known to have been trained on other people's copyrighted material. That's very in the news right now. I would, if I was building one of these systems, want to track a risk around my platform spitting out someone else's content unwittingly, because I think the legislative landscape around that is going to be changing over the coming years. I think transparency and auditability of AI processes, I think that's a risk that you want to be tracking as well. You can't always know why your LLM came to the conclusion it came to. So that is risky, I think, for certain types of platform. And we'll talk briefly about how the EU laws come into play on that as well. Biases and inaccuracies. Most models that are trained on data from the real world will have biases and inaccuracies in it because our training data will also have biases and inaccuracies. We don't need to get into the details of why that is, but that is the case. And I would be worried about a particular risk type, which is my LLMs accidentally leaking customer data or my data to the public, which you're probably tracking a risk around that if you've got ISO 27001 in place right now. But I think the way that could happen will look different in the AI world as well. If you are thinking about ISO 27001 and you are thinking now about the risks inherent in AI platforms, you might want to look into ISO 42001, which is an IT artificial intelligence management system, uses a lot of the same kind of concepts and language as the ISO 27001 standard, and that might be uh, might be relevant to you if you are already an ISO 27001 using person or business. In the EU, if you're building software that targets EU customers, or you are yourself based in the EU, obviously as a UK company, we are not today based in the EU, but many of the customers that we work with who are building SaaS platforms are selling them to customers within the EU, so this becomes relevant. The EU AI Act actually came into force in 2024 and has a number of obligations that come into force over subsequent dates. So in the 3 year window after that, that you need to be thinking about. So if you are selling to EU customers, this probably applies to you. And if you're not thinking about these things, you absolutely should be. The Act defines multiple tiers of risk. And this isn't an ISO 27001 risk scenario where you get to say whether or not you think it's risky. This is defined by the Act. Certain types of use cases are considered riskier than others. Then each of those risk levels in requires a certain level of governance, and you need to be able to sort of find out what that is and implement those governance standards. So I'm not going to go into huge detail about how to categorize what you're doing versus the risk. I'm currently in the middle of writing a white paper about it. So if you're interested in a conversation about is what I'm building currently within one of these risk levels, then please let us know after the webinar, and we'll set up a 30-minute call to take you through what I've been finding so far. It is reasonably cut and dry. I'm not a lawyer; these are legal things, but I can steer you in the right direction, and it's worth being aware of these things. There are also specific rules for general purpose AI providers. So if you yourself are building an LLM, and I know one of our customers is doing that, then there are different rules that apply to you as a vendor of models in a general purpose sense as well. The obligations you'll have as a high risk provider of systems, and these are typically systems that could have material impact on the rights of an individual or their safety or health. Then you need to demonstrate that you have adequate risk assessment and mitigation systems. That will probably be an ISO 27001 or 42001 consideration. You need to be able to demonstrate that the data sets that you're feeding into the system are at a high level of quality. You need to be able to log activity so that you can show results. If you're using Bedrock, that's super easy. You can turn on logging for Bedrock and get an audit trail of everything. You need to be able to provide detailed documentation, providing information necessary on the system and its purpose, so that authorities can assess its compliance if necessary. You need to register that system in an EU-wide database. You need to be able to provide clear and adequate information to the people who are deploying the system. You need to be able to demonstrate adequate human oversight measures, and you need to provide a high level of robustness, cybersecurity, and accuracy in that model. And some of the things that are listed as high risk in the Act, you might look at and think, well, that doesn't look very risky to me. And so you might be caught up in that if you are building systems that use AI today and you're selling to EU customers. If you are selling a general purpose AI, so you're building a model essentially, I've got my acronym backwards in the title then of mine. Then from August 2026, then you will need to be able to issue technical documentation about how it works. You need to be able to demonstrate that you're complying with EU copyright law. That might be difficult depending on how you've trained your model. You need to be able to provide summaries of what that training data was. And riskier general purpose AIs must demonstrate that they are evaluating model safety in an adversarial way, so red teaming from a security perspective. They need to make sure that they've got a good handle on systemic risk. They need to be able to report on usage and how things are going on that side. You need to be able to demonstrate adequate cybersecurity, and you will also need to be able to report on energy efficiency. So if you're building models, these are the things that you need to do. This is the sort of thing that ChatGPT, Claude, etc. will need to be able to show for their European customers. Obligations from the UK. Well, today there is a bill which is currently on its second reading in the House of Lords. So the EU back in 2021, they were thinking about this stuff. it all came into force in 2024. It's well thought out. There's a load of stuff in there. In the UK, someone in the Lords has said, "Hey, maybe we should be thinking about some rules about AI governance." And that bill, which is saying let's think about a proper bill, is on its second reading in the House of Lords, proposed by a chap called Lord Holmes of Richmond, who I actually met for a lunch a couple of years ago when I was doing some lobbying work. He was a Paralympian, and he's from an IT background. We were able to talk on a sort of understanding level. He's part of a cross party organization that looks at information security stuff. He's proposing it. It's working through the House of Lords right now. You can read that proposal. The proposal is that we should be obliging companies to designate an AI officer. So you've got somebody in the business who is responsible for AI and accountable for it, to disclose the use of those systems where they're being used, ensure that they're fair and accountable, that you're mitigating bias and training data, that AI products and services are clearly labeled as such, and that IP and copyright requirements are taken care of as well. But that's the extent of it in the UK right now. We're thinking about a bill. In the US, again, there's no comprehensive federal legislation. I think they're busy doing other things right now, so I don't know how much of a priority this is going to be. But there are, I think, 120 bills variously under consideration relating to AI, and it looks from what I read that they are covering many of the same topics as the EU rules and the stuff that's proposed in the UK: accountability, explainability. Safety, all that kind of stuff. So definitely things that you want to be thinking about if you're deploying AI solutions, or solutions built on top of AI tools. So I think in order to keep up with regulation here, you want to be thinking about incorporating generative AI into your risk model. You will already have a risk model if you're a grown-up business running SaaS. You should probably read and understand the EU Act, or when I finish my white paper, you can read that as well, because I'm trying to make it a bit more plain English and trying to relate it to the things you can actually do on AWS to meet the requirements and the obligations. And you'll need to keep an eye on what's going on in the UK and the US, and in fact any other jurisdiction where you are selling to customers. The EU regulation seems like it was certainly the first. I would expect it to be the sort of gold standard at this point. It's pretty comprehensive, so you should understand what's going on in there. And your directors probably need to know that they will be obliged to do those things, because they will have actual legal obligations, and could be the recipient of fines or prosecution if those rules are not followed appropriately. So, in summary, we want to be investing in model and prompt evaluation tooling so that you can switch models more easily, continuously evaluate those models, and make it easy to switch. I think Bedrock is a good way of doing that. I think if you're building on ChatGPT or the OpenAI stuff and you've never tried any of the other models, I think that would be a mistake. And if you are interested in adopting Bedrock, maybe migrating to it, we may be able to unlock some funding to be able to do that with you on AWS. From a security perspective, I think adopting third-party security tools is a sensible choice because they're pretty undifferentiated, and it's a moving landscape. If you are on AWS and you're using Bedrock, there are a plethora of tools that Amit's talked us through that you can adopt in order to implement guardrails around those models. And from a regulation perspective, think about AI in your risk model. Maybe have a look at ISO 42001. It might be relevant. I haven't dug into it in great depth. It's as dry and dull as the 27001 spec, but it might be helpful to sort of think about in those terms. And do have a look at the EU Act. It's relatively easy to read, but there's a lot of it, and there's an awful lot of sort of cross-referencing and stuff in there. So there's quite a lot of nuance in there. And be aware of what's going on in our country and the other countries you are selling to. We're the Scale Factory. We are an AWS consulting partner. We have a strong AI practice. We've helped many of our customers build either on AI solutions on top of AWS, or productize things that look like AI models. If you're doing any of those things, then we'd love to talk to you about that. We've also got a bunch of review frameworks where we can come have a look at your current practice, and assess whether or not you are meeting the requirements of these types of legislation, and what sort of things you should be thinking about if you're not. And more generally, we do other things on AWS as well. So we'd love to talk to you if you have an AWS project going on. We can generally access funding to cover the cost of some of that sort of work. Some of that funding is unique to us because of the badges that we have within the AWS ecosystem. And yeah, we'd love to help you with any of those things. We had a question on there from Richard, who asked, "Does Bedrock support data and compute sovereignty for Europe?" Amit answered yes. You can select the models in regions where you want to process the request. I think I'm right in saying that not all regions has Bedrock in it right now, and not all Bedrock regions have the same models in. Is that correct, Amit, today?
That's correct, John. But yeah, we are trying to kind of bring most of the common models across all the regions. But all the EU regions do have Bedrock, so essentially you will still have access to some of the other models. Let's speak about if there is any particular model which is not available in the region that you want to use it. But let's talk about it. But majority of the Anthropic models, majority of the Nova models, the AI 21 models, Mistral models, Llama models are still available.
Yeah, great. Yeah, good stuff. Thanks, Harry. Thanks for joining today and for giving us a great overview of Bedrock. If there are further questions, we have about a minute and a half to take those. I'll be glad to take any more. Other than that, thank you very much for joining. Appreciate your attention, and do let us know if there's anything we can help you with. We've got a question in chat. Does Bedrock support ChatGPT? No. For competitive reasons, ChatGPT models are not available on Bedrock. But there are so many other models there that shouldn't be an issue. I wouldn't want to say that there will ever or never be a ChatGPT implementation on AWS, but given that Microsoft and Azure are significant investors, it seems fairly unlikely.
But yeah, as you always say, never say never. So
Who knows?
the exactly the market is opening up, so things might change.
Yeah. Cool.
Hey,
I think that might be it. In which case, thank you very much for your attention and your time. We will be in touch by email, providing you with links to this recording, to the slide decks, which I'm sure Amit is about to send me a PDF of his, so I can combine those together, and details of where you can find my upcoming white paper on the EU rules, and anything else that we can help with in terms of AI on AWS.
thanks everyone. Thanks
Thanks
for
very much, folks.
your questions. Cheers. Thanks, John.